There it is. Perfect. All right, Apu, you want to take over?
Okay, hey, I'm Apu. I work with Dan at Google. A couple of meetings ago, someone from Gradle was talking about how there are like over 2 million checked in jar files called the Gradle wrapper.jar. And if you're familiar with Gradle development, that's pretty normal. It kind of lets each repo define the version of Gradle it's running with, and then embed that kind of in the repository so that builds can just kind of run uh, without having to install a bunch of prerequisites. I don't necessarily know that it's a good or bad pattern. It's just the pattern. Um, and while so that so someone at Gradle developed a little GitHub action that checks that the checked in jar is a known jar, and I think they compare it against all their builds that they have. I think maybe it's just like a simple checking that the hashes exist in their database somewhere. Um, and there's something similar for Maven where you can install a Maven wrapper into your repository that fixes the version of Maven and kind of embeds the Maven build into your repository. And looking around, there's no equivalent action on GitHub to check this. So I'd figured I'd mess around and see kind of what we could do. So what? So I kind of wrote this little project that checks if the checked-in Maven wrapper jar exists on Maven Central under a specific kind of artifact ID. It's not really complicated, but there's some weird things you have to check, like if someone uses homoglyphs of a letter to like hide a jar so you don't check it. But basically, oh, I need to share my screen. Um, so this is kind of a description of what it does. It looks for everything called Maven wrapper.jar or kind of anyone that's trying to masquerade as Maven wrapper.jar and compares it against a SHA-256 of the value in Maven Central. So it goes and parses out the version, parses out the version and then goes into the repository. And Maven, for some reason, only has MD5 and SHA-1 hashes, which I guess have outlived their value. So what this does is it downloads the jar and then calculates the SHA-256. So it's an example of this running. You can run test action for success. So what this can do is, sorry, where's the YAML? These are just test actions that I wrote myself in the repository to check if Maven wrappers are valid. So it goes and it checks against this path, and then it'll read this file and compare it against the Maven repo. But if it's successful, it'll just give you an OK. And in the case where it's not successful, which is this automatic failure case, it'll say something like failed during search for Maven wrapper, potentially fraudulent Maven wrapper at this thing. And this is because this E is like a non-English E. It's like acrylic E or something. The point of this is to validate checked in Maven wrapper binaries, because you can't actually see what's in them, and people will just be like, "Oh, this is just a Maven wrapper. Let it go in." This is, I think I've basically copied everything the Gradle wrapper person did and just applied it to Maven. There's nothing really technically interesting in here. It's just a question of whether this should be a OpenSSF repository based on kind of feedback from the working group. That's really all the demo is.
Are there other languages or anything that do this pattern of checking in a wrapper binary that's opaque? Like I've seen scripts and things like that for other languages, but I've never seen anything like just dropping in jars.
I don't know. I can't come from Java, so I'm familiar with these workflows, and I know a lot of projects that I worked on use them.
How do people update them? Is there like dependabot that'll push new wrapper versions, or are these things like just kind of simple enough and static that you never really worry about it?
Yeah, you update it yourself when you want to update your build target. So like, it's more obvious in Gradle because their API changes a lot more. So like, if you want to build with Gradle 6, you won't get features that appear in Gradle 7. So you want to like fix your build at that version, so that someone building with Gradle 5 will just automatically use your version. This seems to be a Java pattern. I don't know. I don't have a lot of experience with other build tools. I wrote this in Go so I could learn Go. And so that you don't need a JVM in your action. Yeah, it should be pretty simple to apply to repos. I don't know if anyone has any comments.
Presumably, this pattern applies to things that, for example, contain GNU auto tools, things like config.guess and so on. So equivalent tooling could be developed for that.
Yeah, I think this is easy. Well, yeah, you just compare it against the published SHAs or whatever. This doesn't check against signatures, so Maven publishes GPG signatures next to their files in the repo. If you look at one of these, browse, there's like these ASC files.
Why did you choose not to do signature validation?
It just doesn't do it now. I was just wondering like how far I should take this project if this is something. Yeah, so I could kind of embed the public key and verify that. And there's no reason like not to, except that it hasn't been done yet.
Well, all Apache projects are required to do that for releases. I mean, they all have to produce those signature files. And in most projects, including the project I work on, we actually create our own certification, verification tools for all the signage and stuff as well. So those tools exist already. I think a lot of what I'm seeing though is like it's workflow, as you said. So the question is, how do we deconstruct different parts of the workflow, not try to glob them all into one tool? That's what I don't want that to happen. How do we have a set of tools that can be used to do different parts of the things? Because a lot of these things are not language specific at all. And even Maven is not Java specific. Because we use Maven Gradle to build Go. So, you can there are plugins for different languages. So we don't want to go down where we have one monster tool for every language.
Yeah, I mean, we can try to generify it and then
Well, I guess I'm seeing. I attend a lot of work groups. I'm trying to figure out how all these pieces fit together. And just as their best practices is trying to say, let's create a tool list. And the security tools group is actually the security tools group is not creating a tools list. They're just like letting people present tools. But it seems like everyone's trying to create a tools list. Who's coordinating this? I know the best practices leader is going to try to talk to the tools person, but we're doing tools here as well. So the question, who owns this? How do we coordinate?
I don't really have opinions on lists. I haven't been following what the tooling working group is doing. Is it easy enough to just get things onto a list? I don't think we're.
Well, I was gonna say, well, the problem is, and David has a private list in a document you have to ask him for access for. Let's create a master list for all of OpenSSF. Let everyone in a GitHub repo, let everyone kind of contribute and figure out where all this fits, because that would be inclusive of like SBOM tools from SBDX, OWASP, ZAP tools, all the SAS, DAS. Let's work together across groups and agree on what artifact we work against.
Sure, I didn't even know there was a private list somewhere, so that definitely sounds like a problem.
Yeah. Actually, the only one we actually said let's review the list, and only the two chairs of the best practices had access. So it was kind of humorous yesterday.
Yeah, do they want to create a README file in that repo, or?
I don't think anybody took that action item other than the leader of the best practices said, I'm going to talk to David in the tools working group chair to figure out how we share a list. That's how as far as it went. There was this is the first time I said let's create a repo. That just makes sense to me. Let's create repos for this.
I can happily create one if people want. I don't want to do it until check with them, because otherwise we're going to end up with two lists.
I'm saying that. If the leaders. I mean, I assume that you're the leader of this group, Dan, and that David, and David's like
David Wheeler.
So I mean, can the work group leaders get together and figure out how we coordinate this effort? I don't know.
Which David, by the way? Is this David Wheeler?
David Wheeler, yeah. The David, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
The omnipresent David Wheeler.
Well, I can figure out what's going on with his list. I didn't know he had one.
And I said I'm also dismayed that we don't have a list at the tools work group. So.
Cool. Any other topics for today? All right, we get some time back. Thanks, everyone.